carrier on the facility is going to get first choice of that. They're always going to want the top position. Whether they get the 75 feet, the second tenant will get the lower elevation. Whether or not that would, from what we've looked at, that doesn't meet the RF requirements to be at the lower elevation. And kind of that gets back to the nitty-gritty of all of this is I've done both permitting and lease work, and between the carriers or between the providers, whether it's AT&T, SBA, American Tower, ATC, there's always an underlying master agreement. There's an agreement between the two parties of how their terms, their local lease terms are going to come together. In this case, there isn't one currently. SBA and AT&T have no current master lease agreement. So that's not unusual. For a long time, we did not have one. AT&T did not have one with American Tower. So if there's an American Tower facility or an SBA facility, so generally that's kind of an underlying issue that whether they're working on that in the background, negotiating between themselves, if they can come together and put together some type of master lease agreement, then the local providers can put their underlying lease together based on the terms of that master lease. ATC and AT&T now are better cooperating, so if we do come upon an ATC facility, then if we think that might be an option, then we have at least a underlying agreement to work off of. But right now, there's no such agreement with SBA. And I think that was addressed before in the city of Hemet, whether there's another facility and AT&T and SBA working together. So other than that, that's all I have to say right now. And we did go with the eucalyptus tree because that was the preference of the city.
Okay.
So,
Yep. Sure.
So this tower is going to be, is it going to have, I forgot, I was trying to look through here. That's why I like paper ones. This tower is going to have the same type of configuration as the other one on Menlo with the 12
yes.
around it, and you would be at the top of this tower,
Yes.
and that is what your issue is, that you need to be at the top of this tower?
Yes. Yeah. When we do the initial study of the site location, at the initial site walk and in-house, AT&T does their studies, and we provided the propagation maps to show the coverage that's going to be met with this height. And I believe that the top of our antenna on this one is, I think, 74 feet. The top of the antenna is 70. Top of the facility is 75, which accounts for branches.
And you have the ability to have others co-locate on yours?
Yes.
On yours.
Yeah.
But they probably wouldn't because they'd want the top position. So we did end up having another tower come in and say, well, we can't. We need the top position. We can't co-locate on that one because then we'd be at the bottom position. That's, I guess, that's my. And the city has a standard or a requirement of 1,500 feet, and this has been. They came up with GOSH as well, and it's if we don't have, and there's a reason why we have that. I would assume, otherwise it wouldn't be in our.
Yeah.
You know, and so if we're making interpretations into hey, we can vary from that just simply because two entities can't get along or whatever. That I think, and without even, I personally think that it would be. I mean, the monopalm that's existing is only 60 some odd feet, so whatever's there is working just fine at that elevation. Mm-hmm. If there's an opportunity to use that area, which is clearly much more commercial, it's a lot further away from any residential, rebuild that to put AT&T at the 75 feet that they need and keep the existing where they're at. To me, that's more in line with what the city has established that they want.
Well, first of all, I think that as we look at Sanderson Avenue on east and west, because the west side has been more developed industrially and commercially, that except for towards the north where Acacia is. But if you look at the development that had been approved just north of this, which was the whole center that was a commercial and industrial center. So all of that area adjacent to the church's 5 acres is commercial down the road. I don't think that will change, and that's the zoning, and that was already the approved project and stuff. So commercially, I think that's pretty set.
I guess that there's 2 points, and I'm not sure if we're in public or discussion with staff.
Either way, but we can discuss it after we hear from everyone.
Yeah,
or,
maybe that'd be best.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Well, thank you very much. Would anybody else like to speak to this? Okay, please approach the podium. Give us your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. Michael Caldwell, 593 Zaharia Circle, Emmett, California.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. AT&T, I represent Spirit of Joy Church, and a few other folks here they may wish to say also. AT&T approached us. We didn't go looking for this, and we're delighted that they have considered our site for their tower. And to be honest with you, the gentleman here from LA, the attorney, it's a total surprise. And I have a comment for you, sir, is you don't know our church very well. You don't know us at all. And for you to say that we will have buyer's remorse is completely unnecessary. Our church is 100% behind this project, not because of coverage improvements. A lot of it has to do with income, as the lady mentioned earlier. We haven't penciled this in our budget, but we will when it's completed, and we support this. And frankly, I don't know, hope I don't say something wrong here. It would appear to me that the owner of the other tower is more interested in limiting his competition than anything else. We welcome AT&T. They've been great to work with, and we hope this project goes forward. We hope you people approve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone else? Please. Name and address again, please.
Kimberly Altman, 450 Keto Circle, Hemet, California. I wasn't planning to speak on this at all. I just happened to be here. And I was over at Bed Bath & Beyond, and I needed to call my mom because they were having a great sale, and I wanted her to tell me if she wanted me to pick something up for her. And it took me 3 tries to get the call to go through. All I wanted to do is call my mom. 3 tries. So anything you can do and add a little bit more joy to the Spirit of Joy, I am all for it. Thank you.
I think we're all in agreement. We need cell service over there. That's how we're going to get it. Thank you very much. Anybody else like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and we can discuss this. Maybe we can get our legal team involved and the staff, but you know, it's difficult. You made reference to this, that when this commission is placed in between competing entities, it makes it difficult. We may not know all the ins and outs. We're not privy to it, and we don't need to know all the ins and outs. But I think from the city's point of view, correct me if I'm wrong, that we would prefer to see fewer towers as possible, just from just the way they look, and notwithstanding anybody's income or anything else. We want coverage, of course. We want safety and health reasons to have good cell service, and we don't want, you know, thousands of monopalms and fake trees and things like that. So maybe we can get some help from staff or legal and say where we should go with this? Because in my opinion, the entity should speak and maybe come back to us and tell us why we shouldn't be at one, why they have to be at the other. Do I have to be on top or not? I mean, we're not in the business, so we don't know these things.
And I appreciate that, because I completely agree with that. I want to see the church have an opportunity for
I agree.
for revenue. I want to have everyone have coverage, but this our city has already established.
We have a job to do.
Right, and so if that discussion hasn't happened, is there a mechanism for us to encourage that, or
I think that would be a continuance, but can we hear from staff or our legal team?
Well, we brought this project before you because it met the requirements that are set before you in our wireless ordinance. We wouldn't bring anything to you that wouldn't comply with the wireless ordinance. Yes, there's an opportunity here to create a secondary tower. So, can you go back to the photo sims, please? The photo simulation. So if you look at that, from Johnston Street, yes, the tower itself is higher than other trees, but there are trees around in the background. So it's not a sole tower that is against a flat ground. So it does have some components that pulls from the existing tree lines. So that's the one, that's the reason why we asked for a multi-prong mono eucalyptus tree. So it doesn't look like another pole in the ground. And the eucalyptus tree, it's really hard to see on this photo sims, but generally the ones that we've seen and completed don't really have that uniform look. They'll have a little more design to it. So that's one component of it. Two is that, yes, there are existing towers in 500 feet of this proposed location, but again, we're looking at a monopalm. In either case, they would have to build new, whether they're located on the other site or this site, they still have to construct new.
But HP, wouldn't it be they would have to replace the tower, so in effect it would be the same area,
Correct.
15 more feet.
Correct.
I mean,
But
would the Development Review Committee or the City of Hemet prefer to have another, I mean, you've been through that process, so would we rather have another one looking like this, or would we rather have the one? Would that be better for us? Or is it that we're going to have more in the future anyway, and it can co-locate with others? I mean, was that part of the thinking, or help me with this?
well, the part of the thinking is that there are a lot of options out there, whether it's mono eucalyptus, mono pine, mono palm. There's a lot of options out there. We are at a point where you have to make a decision based on the application that's being proposed and being compared to our wireless ordinance. The business decision between the two entities is not part of your purview.
I guess that's the crux of it, and I just go back to, and this is my only hang-up right now, is the city prefers that wireless facilities co-locate unless the applicant can demonstrate that co-location is not a viable option.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that, I mean, if the existing tower is saying, hey, we'll change it, we'll give you, we'll work out a deal, and I don't know the business side of that whatsoever, but I mean, it seems like that would be an opportunity to co-locate. That would be a potential viable option. It just wasn't ran to the ground.
Well, AT&T, and Stephanie would step in, but AT&T maintains their tower. They don't lease it from someone else. So once they construct a tower, it is their tower that they maintain. SBA only constructs tower and leases the space out to different carriers. So in this instance, you have a tower owner who wants another tower owner to combine together. It's not just the antenna component.
Can you read that statement again?
The city prefers that wireless facilities co-locate unless the applicant can demonstrate that co-location is not a viable option.
Can we hear from legal on that?
Yes, so your ordinance verbatim says, if feasible, the location of the proposed facility should conform to the following in order of preference. And initially it says co-located with an existing facility or located at a pre-approved location. But why I wanted HP to speak first to that was to kind of give you an idea of what staff has already reviewed. Again, we wouldn't present anything to you that doesn't conform to your ordinance. Although it is something that obviously through the ordinance it's a preference, AT&T provided a letter saying why it's not feasible. So that kind of just checked off our box in terms of our review in our recommendation for the project. Again, it really is not our purview to determine any kind of negotiations before that. We're really just considering the conditional use of permit approval and whether it conforms to our ordinance. So if you need more information, I do want to throw some options out there for you. So although with these wireless facilities, there technically doesn't have to be written findings in terms of a denial. You know how we are. We like to see things in writing, fully executed, really giving the city a chance to look at that substantial evidence standard in order to show why this doesn't conform to our ordinance. Because as it stands right now, we have nothing in writing that says that we do not conform or this project is in violation of our ordinance. It's actually the opposite. It's saying it's in compliance and should be approved based off the findings that you find in the staff report. So if you do need a little more information, we're happy to provide it. Whatever, I'm not sure what more you would need to hear at this point.
But I think the statement is that he's read twice. And this is what has to do with, we don't want to be, our purview is not between two companies. So it sounds like these are two different business plans, of which we have nothing to do with. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Our idea is that we want to lessen the number of fake trees out there, right? And it says it in the ordinance, correct?
And that's
If feasible. So it doesn't provide any kind of standard to show what that means in terms of
That
why.
means to me that if it's feasible, I want to know why it isn't feasible.
That was in the
Something that came up during the Gosh property was very similar. When they said, we'll do something, we'll fix it, we'll make it work. And for me, trying to force two entities together, that's not our job. But also, if they're in compliance with our ordinances and they do comply, then who are we to say, go see if you can be the top dog on the cell tower, and if you can, you got to build a new one, and they're going to have to go back. What we're doing is forcing two businesses to go negotiate, and that's not our job.
No, and we did want to, HP has it right in front of him. There is a letter outlining why it's not feasible that AT&T.
Right, it's on your attachment number 9, page 2.
On the agenda 5, correct?
Correct. Attachment number 9, page 2, paragraph B, 1B.
Okay.
It states that the existing SBA monopalm and nearby Crown Castle monopine do not have the adequate height to accommodate AT&T's equipment due to AT&T's strict requirements for optimal performance of their 5G and the U.S. government's national FirstNet program. And that's a synopsis of that. AT&T will require a separate distance of at least 10 feet from other antennas in order to prevent interference with other radio antennas. So even if they were to co-locate at 75 feet, whatever the antenna tower that's on top would have to have a separation of 10 feet. Then that would drop whatever the height of the antenna is, plus additional 10 feet. And if you're looking at 8-foot antenna plus 10, that's 18 feet below the highest point of that antenna.
That was the exact same findings we had for that Gosh property, was
Correct.
because even though they were offering that, then they would have to drop down too far. And then even if they gave them the top spot, the co-locator, the other one that was on there already as an existing lessor or lessee, would have to drop that amount, which would put them under their amount, their height that they needed to be. Now that was over there. I don't know what their present tenants are. I don't know who they are. I don't know what their requirements are. But I would imagine that nobody knows either, because that's not been brought up to them.
If the definition of feasibility is based on, technical stuff, then, and that's always going to be an opportunity to say why we're not co-locating, and that checks that box, like you said, that's a requirement, it meets our requirement because it checks the box because somebody wrote up what's required, then we should just change our code and say we don't have that requirement of 1,500 feet. Because that's, in effect, what we're saying is it's any carrier can say, well, we need X, Y, and Z, and that's why we can't co-locate with that tower. And so we're going to end up getting tower farms. If that's the way that technically it has to work, then we should adjust our code accordingly, instead of having something in there that puts us in a position to have to try to interpret, that, hey, the code says 1,500 feet, but this checks the box because they said it has to be a 10-foot of separation and this and that. And my experience with RF was in the military when they said stay away from it. So what concerns me is not concern me, but what I don't like about this is being told that it's a variance because of this technical write-up, but the city still has a standard for 1,500 feet. If it's always going to be a variance, then get rid of the standard, so it's not as difficult for the planning commission to make that determination.
Maybe it's a thing that needs to get back to the council for a change in our policy and our ordinance. Things have changed a lot since these ordinances were put into place. But like I say, we've almost set a precedent, and we had a logical, rational, and justifiable reason for the other one.
Sure. Again, the technology changes all the time, and in the future, perhaps the panels will be shorter and smaller, and they could be closer together. So the 75-foot tower would be adequate to have multiple vendors placed on the same array without interfering with each other. But that's just unknown. So deleting or limiting that portion of the code, I think, would be not as... I think that would meet current needs. It may not address the future needs. So because of unknown situations and the technology changes, the co-location is always preferred, absolutely. And we don't want to just have towers everywhere in the city just because you want the coverage. There are other options and other things that the cell companies are coming up with all the time. So eliminating that, I don't think is going to address the concerns that you have now. I think it's just going to limit or what you can do in the future. So I don't recommend that we go back and change that to eliminate. Maybe we can make it stronger in the language so that it is preferred, but due to technology changes or something to that, then we can add those language to the ordinance itself. But to eliminate the co-location just because of this situation, I don't think it is a good way to go.
And just to add on that, we're largely preempted by federal law anyway. So a large portion of what you even see before you is just that small little piece that we get to still control while at the local level. But, Planning Commission can always ask the City Council to ask our office or staff to look into something and maybe just say that we have seen this come across our desk a couple times and we would just like a little bit of guidance. that's something we can always provide as well. But again, I did want to just bring everyone back to the ordinance itself, what's in front of you and what has been presented, and kind of just focus on the application as it stands. And it is, your concerns are valid. It's not that, it's not something that shouldn't be looked into. But at this moment, we have to evaluate this application as it stands.
So without talking about technical at all, nothing about the businesses. I've heard the statement twice and read it. And then what was the ordinance? Just the ordinance part, not the technical separations or anything. What was our ordinance that you brought it to us and saying, hey, we wouldn't bring you anything that wasn't. So we have a statement that says 1,500 feet. And then what was the part that you had read about our ordinance that said that we don't have to abide that if
Based on their findings of feasibility.
Okay, so the applicant says not feasible, then, okay, like you said, then it just destroys that ordinance kind of, anyway, okay. Yeah, that's difficult. All right. Statements.
Yeah, and it's once again not. Well, and staff got that and looked into it, and you apparently felt like their justification for not being feasible was correct. So, and I'm understanding that our legal teams feels like that too. So, what is our job?
But one more thing, and not to beat a dead horse, but the statement that the applicant said that they didn't think that they could work it out. I mean, anytime we've heard that before, it's like, well, go try to work it out. We'd rather see one pine, tree, whatever. Go try to work it out, and then come back and let us know. Is that something we can't do?
That's out of the purview for us.
All right, well, that does that. Okay. I know these are strict. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments?
No, I think it's been, it is a tough,
Yeah, John, we've done a lot of these, and through the years, I learned more and more about how, again, like our legal says, that there's very little that we can do. We have to focus exactly on what's being presented tonight. So.
And not to say, I'm not trying to stop the Planning Commission whatsoever from inquiring for anything future. I just wanted to focus in on the application that was presented and the ordinance as it stands.
and the ordinance says if it's not feasible.
And they provided
It would be great to get some clarification from legal, from council, from staff, what constitutes feasible. Is feasible just simply we can't work something out, and so then therefore it's not feasible? Is feasible, technical report that says this is why it has to be like that? What's feasible? I mean, to me, feasible is much more optimistic. Hey, we can do it.
Well, it certainly is open.
Yeah.
I mean, feasibility means it's open for, anyway, okay. You gonna kick this any other different direction, or?
No.
Okay.
It's just,
Well, then I will entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll move that we adopt Planning Commission Resolution Bill number 20-005, finding the project categorically exempt from CEQA and approving conditional use permit 19-006, subject to the conditions of approval, and direct staff to file a notice of exemption for CEQA purposes with the county clerk.
I will second. That is approved.
And since that has come up, and it appears that AT&T is determined to fill all the gaps in the valley, could we maybe get a report back on some of this because it's come up twice now, 2 out of 4
Yeah.
locations. And how we can address that maybe through the planning process before it gets to us would be really helpful. Like if we say, have you tried, and if you haven't, why, during that process time. Because once it gets here, then like you say, we're obligated to move a certain direction, to a degree.
Right, to look at the application before you as
Right.
it stands.
Right. And again, I want to thank you for filling the gaps so my friends can't say they didn't hear what I just said all the time. And I appreciate that we're coming into that. And I also know that at one time I was talking to some cell tower folks, and they have been locating in tall buildings, and we don't have that around town. But in some of the cities, there's different ways that they're locating nowadays, which doesn't put the trees all over the place. They put them inside those buildings. So I know there's different ways to do it, but we just don't have those kind of opportunities here with mostly single-story or two-story buildings.
Yeah. Okay. City attorney reports.
Yes, I was going to offer a Planning Commission 101 type report. I noticed that it is getting a little later, so I'm always happy to continue that into next time, or I can present it now, however you'd like.
Maybe if we had the other.
Yeah, let's wait.
Let's say, sure, so we'll go ahead and continue that item. It really just to let everybody know, it's just a general starting point, just for the public to really get an idea of all the laws that you come across and that you have to consider as a planning commission. So it really is just the beginning of a series that we'll go ahead and do and really focus on findings, conditions of approval, things of that nature, to just kind of walk you and the general public through again as a reminder, just a refresher of really planning commission's role and how much you do have to take into account when making decisions and acting as a quasi-judicial.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So looking
Okay.
forward to it.
Okay.
Okay.
Community development reports.
Hey, I just wanted to update you guys on the 3 different ordinances that the City Council has approved and adopted. They did go through a second reading on February 25th. One is for the accessory dwelling unit. The other is for the small and large family daycare. And the third item is for the front yard fencing for single family and multifamily zones. So they all approved, and they had the second reading, and now we're in that 30-day review period. So
Okay.
those 3 items went forward. We do have, we don't have any items prepared and ready for the March 17th. So we'd like to cancel and continue to the April 7th Planning Commission meeting.
Okay.
I do want to kind of give you a little bit of possible topics to discuss in the future, possible work study. We had some residents come in with possible of raising their side and rear yard fencing to 8 feet versus 6 feet. So that's a discussion we'd like to have with you guys, and to see what the preference or the feasibility, what would be, I won't use that word feasibility again. Sure, sure. But to see whether 8 foot would be beneficial or a hindrance to the residential development. Okay. I have nothing further.
Okay. Planning Commission reports, HP.
Chairperson Obermeyer,
I have nothing to report tonight.
Vice Chairperson Overton is absent with notice. Commissioner Lieberton is absent with notice, and Commissioner Van Arsdale.
Well, since I'm in charge of your social calendar in the next 2 months with Ramona,
Yeah.
just want to let you know we are having a downtown festival. The city is co-sponsors with us on Harvard Street on April 4th.
Okay.
Every year there's something that goes on to kick off Ramona for the month of April. And we're downtown on Harvard Street from 10 to 3. Lots of fun, lots of cowboys and our native dancers and lots of people there to have fun, and a cruise in for cars. And then certainly we kick off and we open Ramona on April 18th and 19th. I also want to tell you that we joined together with the library, Hemet Public Library. We applied for a literary landmark for Helen Hunt Jackson, the woman who's the author of Ramona, and we were granted that. These are from the American Library Association, the United for Libraries, and what's really cool about it is we've been granted that, and Helen Hunt Jackson, this is when they recognize authors, historical authors. Truman Capote is one that was recognized by a friend that's here as a snowbird, and he suggested this to us, and we went for it. But it is really special because Helen Hunt Jackson is the first woman author that's recognized with a literary landmark in California, which is really surprising because many states have many women that have been recognized. But she didn't live here, but she had a huge impact. So we'll be doing that on April 25th, and we have a VIP reception and a ceremony, and then being able to come and see the play, so you'll be invited.
Thank you. Commissioner Worth.
I'm just on the two items for today. The first one, I know that there was a place, a residence close to my house that was unoccupied for quite some time, and no one could figure out who owned it. And then one day the dozers came and the county was able to tear it down. And I mean, it just seems like it's with this particular one, we should have some way of fixing that. You know, if no one knows who's there and they pay taxes, or I would assume there's somebody paying us taxes to be there. That seems like something we should be able to address so that gets cleaned up and doesn't have weeds this tall. And then also in terms of future, maybe we can get some clarification. I really appreciate clarification on what our role is relative to interpretation of the term in the ordinance. I have heartburn with that quite a bit. And would like a better clarification. So, besides that, nothing to report.
Okay, well then I will adjourn the meeting until April 7th. Thank you.
Happy election.